Call the April 21st meeting of the Town Council to order. Thank you all for coming. Welcome. We are going to start our meeting as we always do with our roll call.
Councilmember Rob Rennie.
Here.
Councilmember Marcia Jensen.
Here.
Councilmember Mariko Sayek.
Here.
Vice Mayor, did I do that wrong?
You're good. Keep going.
Okay. Councilmember Stephen Leonardis.
Here.
Vice Mayor Barbara Spector.
Here.
And Mayor Marcia Jensen.
Here again. Yes, still here. Before we get started formally, I'm just going to ask you all now to remind you, please silence your devices. You can use them, but please put them on silent. And we are going to be joined this evening by Cooper Peach, who's going to lead us in the Pledge of Allegiance. Cooper, come on up. So I had the pleasure of just talking with Cooper a little bit before the meeting. He is, as you can see, a very confident, he is a very articulate young man. He's a fourth grader at Van Meter Elementary School. He loves Taekwondo. He does interesting things, like he did the sound for the school's play, and I asked him what did he do? He's that guy you see at the concert that sits in the back at the table with a computer and makes all the sound effects happen. And he was almost perfect, not quite. He is going to start taking drum lessons. He loves to play with his dog, a golden retriever Duke. And I am especially interested in what Cooper does. There's another young man who referees soccer, youth soccer, and I'm always really impressed by that. What Cooper does is direct traffic at school. So he tells the parents where to go, and he stops the traffic when the students need to cross the street, and he makes sure that everything's running right. So, and he says, I asked him if people give him trouble, and he said, absolutely not. So, Cooper, we might want to use you someday, but right now we want to use you to say the Pledge of Allegiance. So please start us out.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, with indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
And we can clap for Cooper while he's shaking hands. Okay, the Vice Mayor says that you need to join the council. And let's have another round of applause for Cooper. Thank you for coming in. And now we've got a couple presentations. Want to make? And two of these kind of go together. The first is that the town of Los Gatos and I, as the mayor, did a proclamation in honor of Arbor Day, which is this week. And if any of you were more fortunate enough to come down to our Spring into Green event this past Sunday, where we planted a tree in the town plaza, and we had some amazing booths all around to recognize Arbor Day and our sustainable activities. Thank you, Matt Marley. Thank you, Parson Public Works. Thank you for everyone that made that possible. And so since we don't really have a tree to present this proclamation to for Arbor Day, Matt's going to take it. So Matt Morley, thank you for all you do for keeping Los Gatos green. And in keeping with that theme, our former mayor, Steve Leonardis, started a program called Small Business, Big Applause. And it's only fitting that when we honor Arbor Day and tree plantings, that we honor a great business in town that I'm sure most of you are familiar with the Green Thumb Nursery. So I want to ask Joni, Kathy, and Carla from Green Thumb to come up. And thank you, ladies, for coming. Green Thumb has been in Los Gatos since the 1940s. It's on Winchester, if you don't know where it is or haven't been there. And they have all kinds of great stuff, and they contribute to the community by giving discounts or donating for our planters downtown in North Santa Cruz, and also do just fabulous work. And I've had the privilege of at least knowing Joni for a while now. So I'm really thrilled to give them this proclamation and recognize their business in town. So ladies, congratulations.
I just wanted to thank the community for supporting us for so long, and hopefully we can stay in business too.
Thank you. Thank you for being here. Oh, picture, photo op. Thank you. And April is also Poetry Month. For those of you who were at our April 7th meeting, we had the Poet Laureate for Los Gatos come in. But we also have a program that we do every year, and it's run by a tireless, talented woman who has given so generously of her time to the town, to the schools, to the arts. And she's going to introduce her students and tell us a little bit about that tonight. So Joanne Talasfor, now on the Planning Commission. Joanne?
I have to tell you, it's always a pleasure for me to do this. And so what I want to tell you is that 4 years ago, or 5 years ago actually, April was declared Poetry Month here in Los Gatos. And tonight, 3 students from Fisher Middle School will be reading their poems to you. Poetry is probably the most complex part of language and provides the most unique outlet for creativity, change, and community, and in this case, our community of Los Gatos. The poets tonight will hopefully enhance us with our understanding of who lives in our community and the connection we all might share. So listen, please, as these 3 poets tell us what they think, what they want us to know about them, and what we might, in turn, remember about ourselves. So I'm going to call up Margarita Fedorova is first. If you'd like, you can hold it or you can put it up there. Need help?
No, I got it. Thank you. So I am Margarita Fedorova, and I am from Fisher Middle School, and this is my I am from poem. I am from the sweet smell of boiling corn and the tasty hot cocoa that is a bit too warm, and the stuffed animals crowding my bed. I'm from an old and small house where things break, crumble, and flake off, but I call this place home. I'm from the redwood tree that drops pine needles onto our car, and from the lizards and bugs that crawl in our yard, and the dirty shin guards. I am from the goodnight kisses and sibling fights, which I dislike, from Mom, Dad, and Maxim. I'm from the laughs and chats and jokes and loving Bengal cats and opened Coke. from Eat Your Chicken and Can I Please Go to Their Place? I am from Monday Mornings and Interesting Stories. I'm from the Cheesy Pizza and Overcooked Cookies and Birthday Surprise Goodies. I'm from Photo Albums That I Keep Close. I love my family and friends in Random Insanity. That's it. Thank you.
One thing, oh, come on, Levi. One thing I wanted to mention, I'm sorry to break this up, is that these 3 poets were chosen out of the 8th grade class. That was 451 students. So these were the selected poets. So,
I'm Levi Zamora, and this is my Where I'm From poem. I'm from one rowdy pair of Vans to the next. I'm from clean T-shirts and dirty jeans. I'm from the gloomy gray walls of my room, lightened by the vast window stretching across the outer edge of our minuscule house. I am from the mountains dropping off under my home and the rodents living there. I am from edamame for breakfast, grilled peaches on salads, and whatever we have left. I'm from Bumper and Trivial Pursuit, Mom and Yahtzee, and Dad and Gin Rummy. I'm from the first one home and the last one to leave. I'm from the breeze of a cool autumn evening and the warmth of the fire at my back with a cup of Earl Grey. I'm from scatterbrained, unplanned, mixed match. I'm from being lost with my thoughts on long walks home. I'm from Lucas, Jason, Frank. I'm from Shell, John, Rick, Lois. I'm from me time. I'm from reluctantly following small yet important rules and cutting corners on the unimportant ones. I'm from one planet, one state, one town, one home, one me.
Hi, I'm Gigi Ward, and this is my Where I'm From poem. I'm from pillows and blankets and the colossal forts I made with them. I'm from the dirt in the park that covered my hands and feet. It was always cold. I'm from the smell of toaster waffles on school mornings and the warmth of my striped pajamas. I remember these days as well as I remember my own birthday. I'm from the bell noise my dog's collar makes, the sound of my alarm clock playing any way you want it. I'm the creaks in the wood floor, the broken toaster, in our entirely red kitchen. To late nights finishing books or family game nights where we all usually ended up on the floor covered in cards. I'm from the closest family, mom, dad, brothers, aunts, uncles, sisters, and all. I'm from the money I wasted downtown, the summer nights watching movies and wearing oversized jackets. I'm from the smell of the sweets we bake every Christmas. I'm from the frustration of arguing that dance is a sport. I'm from the quiet pitter-patter of footsteps down our tall staircase. I'm from Campbell's tomato soup on rainy days. I'm from the house on the corner of Longridge and Leicester. I'm from the small town of Los Gatos.
Don't run away. We have little prizes. Parting gifts, very appropriately. We just wanted to give you some pins. Thank you very much. See your burial. Thank you. Thank you for being courageous enough to come and read and share with us. Thank you. So members of the council and those of you waiting for the boards and commissions appointments, I know that I did this out of order, but I thought we would let our students be on their way. So earlier this evening, we did interviews, we being the town council, for several boards and commissions that are in the town that people have applied for. And before we start our votes, I want to thank, on behalf of the council, everyone who applied. Our boards and committees and commissions are very important to the town, very important to the town council, and the advice and the ideas that they give us are invaluable. So if you don't get appointed tonight, thank you. Try again. We have lots of openings. So some, in fact, committees that we have openings for that we didn't have applications for tonight. So if for whatever reason you're not appointed tonight, try again. So what we'll do is I'm going to, I guess, ask Ms. Rose to lead it for us, and we'll take votes on each of the ones. I wanted to announce that because some of you had questions in the way it was set up, we interviewed for the Bicycle Pedestrian Advisory Committee, which is going to be made up of 7 people. We had 3 at-large commission, we had 3 at-large appointments, or 4, I guess, to make. In any event, when that commission was created, one of the duties of that commission was to appoint from among its members the representative to the VTA board. So the council is not going to be appointing that position tonight. We are counting on the newly created commission to make that appointment. So we're going to just make votes for those positions on the commissions tonight. So the first one, Ms. Rose.
Tonight I'll begin the process by announcing each board, commission, and committee, the number of vacancies, the number of applicants, and the name of each applicant in alphabetical order. When the applicant's name is read, I'll ask council to vote by a show of hands. And after we've voted for all applicants on each commission, I will go ahead and reiterate who was appointed to that commission. Upon completion of the appointment process, council may direct the clerk administrator to re-advertise any open boards, commissions, or committees for the evening. So the first commission is the Arts and Culture Commission. There was 2 vacancies, 1 applicant. The applicant was Linda Dane. Can I get a show of hands? So that was 4. So Linda Dane will be appointed to that commission. The next one is the Bicycle and Pedestrian Advisory Commission. There's 3 openings, 4 applicants. The first applicant was John Adland. He had 5. The second applicant was Peter Hurtan. 5. The third applicant was Jeff Longridge. Buckridge. And the fourth applicant was not able to make it tonight. So you have 3 applicants, John, who have all been appointed: John Adland, Peter Hurton, and Jeff Lockridge. We're not going to VTA, right? The next one is Community and Senior Services Commission. You have 1 vacancy and 2 applicants. The first applicant is Beto Baines. The second applicant is Dave Knapp. So Dave Knapp will be appointed by 5 votes. The next committee is the Planned Development Zoning Study Committee. You have 4 openings and 5 applicants. The first applicant is Lou Albert. The second applicant is Jeffrey Barnett. The third applicant is James Foley. Fourth applicant is Lee Quintana. The fifth applicant is Jack Van Natta. I have that next. Okay, so James Foley, Lee Quintana, and Jack Venata were appointed to that committee. The next one is the Personnel Board. You have 1 vacancy and 1 applicant. The applicant is Jennifer Lewis. Okay. Jennifer Lewis would be appointed to that commission. So plan development is 4 openings. I'm sorry. So plan development, we have Jeffrey Barnett, James Foley, Lee Quintana, and Jack Bonata, all appointed to that commission. And that's it for this evening. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Ms. Rose, and thank you to everyone who applied. And for those of you who were selected, congratulations. And we look forward to your work. We have a closed session report. Or it should, just before I do that, Mr. White, should the council now make a direction to re-advertise for those positions that were not filled this evening? And do we need a motion for that, or simply to direct that it be done? Okay. So directed. Closed session report.
Yes, good evening. Prior to tonight's regular session, council met in closed session to discuss the appointment of the town manager. No action was taken that requires reporting under the Brown Act.
Now's the time for, on our schedule for council matters. This is the occasion that we use to tell other members of the council and members of the public what we have been doing in between these meetings where we have acted on behalf of the town or attended something that may be of interest. So, Councilman Rennie.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I actually have quite a long list. I'd like to start off by saying, though, I enjoyed attending the Green Bike Lanes ribbon cutting with the rest of the council. I think everybody was in attendance. I also attended the Parking and Transportation Ad Hoc Committee with the Vice Mayor on April 9th. I'll let her give a little more details on that. Last night, I attended the HCDAC Committee, which is the Housing and Community Development Advisory Committee that advises the County Board of Supervisors on grants for community service and affordable housing kinds of things. We worked on, we got a presentation and worked on a 5-year plan for them. As part of that information, they told us that they were actually getting a reduction in federal funding at about 5% a year, so they're having to come up with funding from other sources such as the county and so forth. They did tell us that 30% of households are below the median income of $71,000 for a family of 4, and also they did that Santa Clara County was the 4th largest population of homeless people in the country, and it's the highest unsheltered homeless. They did several community forums to ask the community in our communities actually what the number 1 needs were, and affordable housing came up number 1 in all categories. Senior needs came up as second in several categories. So as a result, they recommended and we adopted goals of affordable housing and preservation creation, support activities to end homeless, support activities to provide community service, strengthen neighborhoods, and fair housing choice. So that means over the next 5 years, we'll be targeting those areas for the grant funding. And that goes to the Board of Supervisors on May 5th. I also attended kind of a fun event where I anchored the Los Gatos team in a bocce ball tournament with the League of Cities, which occurs every year. We did manage to beat Campbell in the first round. We beat Fremont in the second round. We beat the League of Cities team in the third round. We beat Sunnyvale in the fourth round, but lost to Morgan Hill 3-2 in the finals. Unfortunately, I couldn't bring the trophy home. I also attended the Cities Association, which was broken into 3 pieces. The first was the Legislative Committee of the Cities Association, where we reviewed legislation that is matches our goals for this year, our areas of work for this year. We unanimously decided to support Leno's bill, SB 3, on minimum wage. We decided to support AB 1335 of Atkins, which is Building Home and Job Act, which is about building affordable homes. We also supported AB 35, which is Chu and Atkins, which is low-income housing tax credit. We decided to watch AB 1056, which is Atkins also on Second Chance Program for Community Reentry, related to people getting out of prison. Most of the time they're coming out with no place to live, so that was a bill that was addressing that. We wanted to understand it further, so we only watched it. We watched also AB 313 Atkins, which is Enhanced Infrastructure Financial Districts. And we also put a watch on SB 9, which is Bell's bill, which is kind of a modification of AB 32 to move towards big capital improvements funding for transit and intercity rail and so forth. We also had met the Cities Association Selection Committee, and we appointed somebody to the ABAG Hazardous Material Policy Committee. We then had our Cities Association board meeting where we covered, we had several presentations, one which was by the Silicon Valley Community Foundation, where they told us about affordable housing need again from a different organization here. They also talked about doing a nexus study where you basically study the impact of development versus the need, and they've done one with all the 14 jurisdictions in San Mateo. They're planning to try to do one in Santa Clara and get the cities in Santa Clara to sign up. The idea of the nexus study is to be able to know what the maximum fee you could charge, impact fee you could charge, and also to help figure out what sort of the appropriate level of fees, the balance of fees to not impact development while collecting the money that you need to do the other city services as a result. Skipping a little bit, we also heard a report out on the BACWA, which is studying that they're focusing on wood smoke, and they're finding that wood smoke is as bad for you as cigarette smoking, and they're looking towards putting a law in place or lobbying for a law in place that would force all wood-burning fireplaces to be converted to gas or walled up when a house is sold, actually. They also had something on a new human respiratory model that's a lot more complex and allows them to understand better the effect of toxins on lung tissues. And as a result of that, they expect, they're finding that some toxins are 3 times more, have more effect on humans than we believe. So that would lead to going towards law for more regulation of toxins. I think the cement plant in Cupertino is going to be in trouble on that one. We talked about other things, but that's probably a long enough report if you're still awake. Thanks.
Thank you. Vice Mayor.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I'm awake, yes. There were several community events in the past week. In addition to the ribbon cutting for the green bike lanes, there was the Spring into Green that we had on Sunday. But as far as the Parking Ad Hoc Committee, we were presented, this was a very effective meeting. We were presented with issues relating to parking structures by staff, and the committee made decisions on each one. Thank you.
Thank you. Since our last meeting, I believe the Policy Committee met. Did we not, Vice Mayor? The Policy Committee is just working through all of the town codes, ordinances, policies, memoranda, notes, urban legends that exist in the town of Los Gatos and trying to organize them. And I believe we had a meeting since April 7th. I also attended the VTA Policy Advisory Committee. Most interesting thing to know from that is that the VTA continues to work on how it is going to structure a proposed sales tax measure for 2016 regarding transportation issues in Santa Clara County. I also attended the Santa Clara Valley Water District board meeting, which, in a word, is scary. Our PPW and staff, Mr. Morley and Mr. White, are going to be coming back to the council on May 5th with recommendations for the town. As many of you are aware, the governor has put in place lots of conservation measures, and Los Gatos is going to be following up with that on May 5th. Councilman Leonardis.
Thank you, Mayor Jensen. Since our last regular meeting, I attended the West Valley Sanitation District Board of Directors meeting when I was the chair. It was a general business meeting, mostly made up of consent items.
Okay, and in addition to all the other meetings that have been mentioned, I did attend the Housing Trust Investor meeting, with Councilman Rennie. You forgot to include that in your long list.
Okay, thank you, everyone. Manager matters, Mr. White.
No items to report.
Thank you. Now's the time in our meeting where we take up our consent calendar. These are items that the staff has determined could be acted upon in a single motion because either they're not complicated or they're routine or some other reason. That being said, however, anyone in the audience or anyone in the council may pull any of those items from the consent calendar, and if it is pulled, we will just hear it in its normal order. So right now, our consent calendar consists of 4 items. Would anyone on the council like to pull an item from the consent? Would anyone from the audience like to pull an item from consent? Okay, seeing no one, I'm going to look to for a motion. Vice Mayor?
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Move to approve consent calendar items 1 through 4.
Is there a second?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Opposed, none. It passes unanimously. We will now move on to verbal communications. Verbal communications is a time when anyone can address the council for 3 minutes, up to 3 minutes, I should say, on any item that is not on our regular agenda for tonight. So I have a couple cards, but if anyone else would like to speak, you may do so. And if you are going to speak tonight, you'll see these little cards in the benches in front of you. Just fill out the information that's required, hand it to one of our clerks over here. They'll give it to me, and I'll call your name, and you can come up and speak to us. So the first person for verbal communications is Jack Van Ada.
Good evening, Jack Van Ada, 165 Euclid. I would just like to briefly mention the necessity I feel for traffic simulation software, and I'll use the North 40 as probably the biggest and best example. As dropping back to Albright, the addition of Palo Alto Medical, the addition of the Stanford Medical Center, and Swanson Ford, as we listen to all of the mitigations, and we as the general public are listening to these additions to traffic, and everything is being mitigated, and everything sounds like it's coming out to be just fine, but it doesn't make sense to me. I'm probably a visual learner rather than an audio learner, and to tell me that that was all mitigated with those huge projects doesn't make sense. In fact, I look at it as another version of fuzzy logic. The traffic simulation software would give all of us the ability to see, we could even put it online, and we could see what the addition of each one of these projects does to town traffic. I know all of you are reading the same things that I am, that people are really getting fed up with traffic, and they haven't even seen Netflix start up yet. They haven't seen Palo Alto Medical start up yet. North 40 is several years away, and Stanford, I believe, is just starting to move in. But the traffic simulation software online gives us all the ability to assess what's coming our way. And I did talk to the Grosvenor developers, and the statement was that the software was too expensive to put in it at this point of the planning process. And I understand they've put in millions of dollars at this point, but the traffic is a huge item. Traffic and schools were the 2 biggest issues that the public had with the North 40. It seems like the schools now is mitigated, that there's an agreement between the developer and the schools. So what we have left is the traffic. And what I would like to see is that we get some, not we, I think the software is probably too much for the town of Los Gatos, but there are consultants out there that could do traffic simulation programs, and I would like to see what happens when we start adding all these projects in. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Van Natta. Angelia Dorner. Ms. Dorner, you always make it exciting.
I sure try. I am Angelia Dorner, a proud resident of the Almond Grove. Let's make sure this works up here. And I will never forget my first May in Los Gatos when all of a sudden, there arose such a clatter, I sprang from my bed to see what was the matter. Out the back door and down the short alley around the corner, and there was like a pep rally. Yes, it's May, and it's time for the Cats Hill Classic, being held on May 2nd. People from all over the world come to Los Gatos for this bicycle race. And it's not just a bicycle race. It is a mean bicycle race because it involves going up Cats Hill, up, Cats Hill, many, many times. So the course is actually all throughout the Almond Grove, and it starts and finishes at Tate and Nicholson, starting south on Tate to Bean Avenue, up and around Bachman Park, and of course in between those two spots is Nicholson, which is Cats Hill Race. So this is the first race starts at 9:20 in the morning, and the last race, which is pros from all over the world, starts at 5 p.m., where they go around, I guess, like 75 minutes. It's not just one lap. They go round and round and round. There also is a children's event, sort of a fun ride at 12:30, so it is definitely a family affair. So I just wanted to make sure everyone knew about it, that they headed downtown. Please spend time in our wonderful Almond Grove and just enjoy the time out there. It is really a great experience. And since you're going to be in the Almond Grove, I wanted to make sure you knew where that $4 million was going to be spent. As of right now, there is only 3 streets that is going to be targeted to be spending that $4 million. Those 3 streets are Tate, Bachman, and Broadway, way over there. The other streets, which are up here in a peach color, are not going to be touched for the next 5, according to the new CIP budget, and maybe even 10 years. So all of those pink streets that you're watching as you go around town will continue to look like this. These are all pictures as of today. Think about what they're going to look at in another 1, 2, 3, 5, 10 years. How can that be? Well, the scope has gotten out of control. They are narrowing the streets. Yes, narrowing, not widening them. They are narrowing our streets. They are wiping out curbs, gutters, sidewalks that absolutely do not need to be done. They're ripping out trees, beautiful established trees that aren't causing any problems, and potentially replanting brand new trees that are going to be sucking up a lot of water. So, hear ye, hear ye. Come on down and enjoy the Cats Hill Race, enjoy the Almond Grove, and please be sure to wear some protective gear because you might just trip on one of those streets or sidewalks. Thank you.
Ms. Dorner, thank you. Mark Weisler, or Weisler.
And this is my mom's cowbell. It's about 120 years old. Or not her
You know the
cowbell,
video, right?
From her farm.
I just need some cowbell. Okay. Mr. Weisler.
Leah, could you please return my pitch? Thank you. I don't have it memorized. I'm Mark Weisler. I'm from 208 Tate. That's part of the Almond Grove. And I'm here to address the Almond Grove resurfacing project. At one of the last meetings we were at, one of the councilmen actually wondered why it was that we don't have outreach meetings before we have consultants do more detailed design drawings. And this was essentially asking about the problem-solving process or the decision-making process for this and similar projects, the methodology, you might say. It would seem to me that a good problem-solving approach would satisfy what I presume is a requirement that the town of Los Gatos use due process in coming to decisions and undertaking projects. Let me outline a few of the elements of a problem-solving process that I believe would lead to less citizen discontent and be due process. What follows is probably familiar to you. If community is involved in a process like this at all stages and from the beginning, it has a pretty good chance of building community consensus. The community will help keep the process headed toward meaningful alternatives, and the outcome will be a recommended solution the community likes or agrees with. So this process. Again, you're probably familiar with this kind of thing where you have a problem statement, you have facts, money in the bank, that kind of thing, assumptions, constraints on size of the project, whatever it is, considerations. For example, things like traffic accident history, pedestrian injury accidents, whatever is part of that project, in this case, streets and sidewalks. Values, in this case, some would be the protection of trees, which is a stated goal of the project, but we haven't heard about a stated goal being the safety of our pedestrians and citizens. And then we would move on to analysis, in which we consider and evaluate all the information in the preceding stages, including, for example, in this one, the analysis of competing goals between the saving of trees and the safety of our citizens, pedestrians, and motorists. Then we move on to alternatives, including advantages, disadvantages of each, and how much each one would cost, that kind of thing.
That means you have 30 seconds.
Thank you. And then we would evaluate those and move on to a final solution. This process would avoid designing solutions distasteful to the citizens, like the traffic calming incorporated into the earlier aspects of this project. So I request that before the council decides on a specific course of action for this repaving in the Almond Grove, that council put a discussion of these topics on the agenda for a future council meeting, including the problem-solving process that has been used in this project. Thank you.
Thank you. That's all the cards I have for verbal communication, except for one. You can go ahead and then hand it to the clerk and tell us your name when you stand up.
Ingrid Oakley-Gervin, 260 El Cajon Way, Los Gatos. So I just wanted to ask one quick question. And I know that the schools get a pass on EIRs, but I've recently come into some knowledge that the entire back green surface is going to be artificial turf at the high school. And there's quite a bit of worry about this. I actually have a PhD from Stanford Medical School. I do cancer epidemiology research. And I just did a little bit of research quickly today, so I haven't done a thorough job. But there are a lot of toxic and carcinogenic compounds contained in tire waste that is used in this artificial turf. That alone is a potential health risk to the kids and to anyone else who's using the fields on a regular basis. The other concern is runoff into the waters, and of course that goes right down into the creek, and we are supposed to be good stewards of that environmental area. So I don't know if it is under the town purview to consider an EIR for something that's as vast as this. I thought it was just the football field, and that seemed a reasonable, acceptable risk, I guess, in a balance scale. But the EPA actually no longer says that artificial turf is perfectly safe. They have changed from don't worry about it to we no longer consider it perfectly safe. And in the research world, it takes a number of years to do a project and compare and contrast. It's not a short time frame, and turf hasn't been around for that long in large doses like this. There's also a law being proposed by our governor to ban the use of artificial tire waste, artificial turf in schools and parks for 2 years, and that's sitting on his desk waiting to be signed. The Santa Clara Water District recommends against artificial turf. So I'm wondering where does the town need to stand on this, and how, do we have a proper discussion about this? I understand there have been a lot of plans put in place, and having been on LGF for many years, I know how frustrating it is to try to sit back and say, oh, do we have to look at this again? But this is the health of our kids and our community and our waterways, and I think that we do need to be responsible stewards. So I don't know if you need to be involved in it, but I just thought I would mention it. Thank you.
Thank you. And let me ask, before you leave, just exchange information with one of the members of our staff so that they can answer your questions and get your input before you leave.
Yeah,
Thank you.
absolutely. Thanks.
Anyone else that wants to talk to us in verbal communications? Okay, I'm going to move on to the regular agenda. And before I do so, just let me give you all in a short explanation of how we conduct the public hearings. So as we go through the business tonight, what we're going to do is call, I think we have, I'm not sure how many because I lost count, but as we go through the public hearings, what we're going to do is call the matter. We will ask whatever staff person is knowledgeable about that matter to give the council a presentation. Council members then have the opportunity to ask questions of that staff member. And once those questions are answered, we will invite members of the audience who want to talk about that particular matter to come up to the podium and talk. You have 3 minutes to talk, as you saw that went on with verbal communications. The lights are going to go on while it's green, you're fine. When it's yellow, you have 30 seconds, and when it's red, you're done. And I will try to remind you as politely as possible either to wrap up or that your time is done. Council may have questions for the speakers, so please don't run away until we see if there's a question for you. Once that is all completed, then I'll close the public hearing, and the council can then ask more questions of staff if they have any. They can make a motion or they can make discussions about the matter, and then we'll end up making a decision, hopefully, through a motion process. So that's how it's going to work tonight. So the first thing that I'm going to call is item number 5. Which is, I'm going to just read the formal title. A consideration to authorize the town to negotiate changes to the 1995 Montecito Police Services contract with the city manager of Montecito to adjust the annual increase cap and to consider other cost-sharing adjustments. So who from the staff is going to give us that report? Mr. White.
Yes, Mayor, members of the council, we are recommending that you authorize the town manager and the police chief to sit down with the city manager of Montecito to make adjustments in the annual percentage cap, which is the cost of living increase, including salaries and related costs, as well as negotiating other reimbursement improvements, and I'll comment a little more on those in a moment. We gave you a rather large packet of detailed reports from previous meetings, but I want to assure you that our efforts at the staff level is to focus this discussion on renegotiating the contract with Montecito, and that is all that we're prepared to present tonight. We believe that overall it's been a beneficial contract since it was initially signed in 1995. As we will show you on a map, you can see Montecito on the left side there, surrounded on 3 sides by the town of Los Gatos. We think that over time the arrangement has been mutually beneficial, primarily because of the close relationship of the town to Montecito. Over the course of the contract since 1995, we've been averaging roughly $600,000 in revenue from the town. We do, however, believe that there is a need to sit down with the city and to have discussions with them, and the city manager has indicated a willingness to do so, about covering additional cost. In particular, the one that jumps out is the cost for investigative services, which is a direct cost frequently covered in other contracts between, say, the county and other agencies as a regular cost, but not included in our contract. Now, of course, our contract runs until 2025, and so we have to have a willing partner to sit down and discuss it. And every indication I have is that there is a willingness to talk about these items and to generally look at updating what has been a relatively solid contract over a number of years. In the case of investigative cost, we think that the amount of money that needs to be discussed would probably be in the range of $100,000 plus dollars. We believe that a increase of this nature would still allow Monte Sereno to be competitive in terms of what they would be paying the town with what they would have to pay for similar services if they sought them in a different manner. We would also discuss indirect costs with them, although candidly, indirect costs in terms of what other contracting agencies levy is usually just a part of the direct cost and is considered just a part of the operation of a contract. In other words, that's a long way of saying that those costs typically aren't reimbursed. But we would talk to them about that because there are some administrative costs and dispatching costs that need to be on the table. We need to review the annual percentage increase in the contract for salaries, benefits, and related expenses because that it's time to do that. Over the course of the contract to date, the cap or those percentage cost increases has ranged from 2.4% to 8% and actually averaged out at 6%. Finance department looked at our actual cost, which also averaged out roughly 6%. So based on what we have in the contract, we've been getting a reasonable return. It's not so much a question of what is in the contract as it may be a question of what isn't in the contract. So that discussion would occur along with any other additional services. We've looked at a couple of, one other thing I want to mention because it's really apparent when you see how the beats line up, and I think those aren't the colors that I'm used to, Chief. Are those the two beats there in the tan and the darker color? Correct. Yes. Well, those two beats have existed pretty much from the beginning of the contract, and they are very interwoven so that our officers, in effect, travel through Monte Sereno even to get to parts of Los Gatos. And I think the benefit of this arrangement has been that in emergency situations and during high-risk crime situations, there's a real ability to quickly exchange the officers moving from Monte Sereno into Los Gatos and vice versa. We've looked at two alternatives, which would be don't change the contract or terminate the contract. We do believe that Monte Sereno is willing to talk about the contract, so we should, in our opinion, go forward with that option. We do not see any particular advantages or pluses to terminating the contract. We think we need to pursue improvements to the contract, and that basically what it needs is tweaking and not necessarily dismantling. So we are asking for your direction to sit down with the city of Monte Sereno. We would like to try to make every effort to report back to you on the negotiations before the end of this fiscal year and bring to you recommendations for changes in the contract. With that, we're available to answer any questions. I want to thank the chief for doing a lot of hard work on the data again and again and again. and for finance stepping in and looking at and validating a number of our numbers in the report.
Thank you, Mr. White. I'm going to look to the council for any questions you might have of Mr. White, Chief Frisbee, or finance people. Councilman Rennie.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. So I want to be a little bit more clear on what you're going to be negotiating. You talked about gaining 100,000, and I think I see 4 areas. You could negotiate just generally a higher dollar amount or higher percent for what we have now, or you have several items in the budget that are not individually charged. They're just part of the contract, such as investigative budget, records budget, dispatch budget. Guessing that you're going to go after including investigations budget?
We're going to put virtually everything we can on the table because it is a discussion and a negotiation. What I would emphasize is that the strongest case can be made for the investigation cost, because that is typically a direct cost that you'll find other contracts reimbursing for that service, and ours doesn't do that. So that would be one, but we will also raise some of the indirect costs as well.
Other questions? Councilman Leonardo.
Thank you, Mayor Jensen. Mr. White, on our staff report, and this is the one that was dated from February 2nd, 2015, it says the population is 30,391, the population of Los Gatos. And I went on Wikipedia, and that's the number that was on Wikipedia. And it says the population of Monte Sereno is 3,485. And my understanding of the population, when you look at it on Wikipedia, is it's within town limits. But in Los Gatos, we have 50-something county pockets. So I think we're counting service of our population perhaps more than once, in the sense that all those county pockets are served by the Sheriff's Department. So I think there's a number of about 2,500 people that live in the county pockets within the town limits that are already being served by another police agency. And according to this figure that we based all of our other figures on, I think we're counting them double. And I'm also pretty sure, and I'm not sure how many county pockets there are, what the population would be in Monte Sereno, but there's also county pockets within Monte Sereno. So the question becomes, what is the actual population that we're serving, and can we get some figures based on that so we know how to negotiate better with Monte Sereno?
We did look into that, and according to the Department of Finance's website that we did double check on those numbers, the incorporated population for Los Gatos, according to their numbers in 2014, is the 30,000 number that is depicted. That is where we got that number, and it's supposed to be inclusive of annexed and only municipal areas, not to include county pockets.
And the same for Monte Sereno as well? Is that
correct? We use that site for both of those numbers, to the best of my recollection.
Thank you.
Councilwoman Sayoc.
Thank you. So thank you for the detailed information provided. I did want to understand clearly how you would negotiate the investigative costs. Would these be costs, if agreed to, do you envision basically billing them directly, the costs that are made toward that specific investigation? Would there be an estimate up front of how much you think it would be? Would there be a cap? Would it be open-ended? What are some of the parameters that you plan to walk into the negotiation with?
That's hard to say, because we need to keep rather flexible in terms of our discussions with Monte Sereno. I would like to be able to look at an hourly rate for the investigative cost attributable to Monte Sereno. I would imagine that they would want to look at some kind of a cap on that. We would also look at an option such as we had in the report, which would be built on the number of cases that they actually incur during the year and have a cost based on that. And you could use, in that case, a historical cost and use that as a starting point. So those are some of the parameters that we would be looking at. But honestly, to say that we have looked at it in more detail than that would be precluding the opportunity for us to sit down and negotiate.
And I know that when you were doing your research, you looked at how other models exist, particularly with the sheriff department. Are those examples that you would also use when looking at examples of what you would be presenting?
I'll let the chief comment on that. He has looked at hourly rates from the standpoint of what the county does.
Okay.
That definitely would be one of the parameters that we would use. We obviously take into consideration what Monte Sereno could do if they didn't employ us for their police services. So the best comparisons are the other contract cities within this county. And as attached in the staff reports, those costs are fixed and uniformed throughout all of their contracts. So it would be one of the parameters, as the manager explained, that I think we would use as a guideline to understand what would be competitive.
Other questions? Councilman Leonardis.
Thank you, Mayor Jensen. On page 6 of the February 2nd staff report, it shows a cost per capita gross for Los Gatos, $467.42, and then the cost per capita of Monte Sereno at $166.29. And it's a huge disparity in numbers. And I look at, the amount of service that we're providing to Monte Sereno, and it's essentially the same service. We still have to have, victim services. We still have to have CSI. All the departments and all the specialists we have, whether there's crimes being committed or not, we still have to pay for all that stuff. So I'm trying to understand, obviously, when the contract was written, it was written mainly based on the amount of patrol. But is it possible to go back to them and say, let's move more towards parity on all these services we provide? Because when I read all the correspondence from the people in Monte Sereno, they're entirely pleased with the service they're getting, and that's wonderful. But the cost of the service they're getting is a lot higher for our citizens than it is for their citizens, and the service is about equal. So from this council person, I'm thinking it would be, be better for me to see costs get much closer towards what our citizens are paying.
And I understand that point, and anything is possible when you sit down to negotiate. And I do know that from looking at the original contract that we do provide a number of services that we provide to residents of the town, to the residents in Monte Sereno as well. So we will talk about those things.
Thank you.
Other questions? Okay, seeing none, I'll look to the audience and see if there's anyone that wants to talk to us about this matter. Sir, just come forward and give us your name.
Good evening. Doug McNeil, 17413 Pleasant View Avenue. I wanted to applaud the council and town mayor and chief of police for negotiating the contract with Monte Sereno. I think this is a valued relationship. The benefit that's been brought to both communities is outstanding. I will point out that the support from the city, the support from the community of Monte Sereno is 100% behind the police department. And I look forward to a straightforward communication and negotiation between both towns. I think this issue arose because the one Kumar case had some extensive overtime that came in the form of one large bill. And I think like any business in this valley, if a bill gets run up, usually the case is that people will come forward and present a cap or at least an understanding of what the projected cost would be. And this created a little bit of a rift between both sides. So I think fair and open negotiations and a revisit on the contract is timely. And I want to thank all of you for considering this. And I look forward to a great business relationship moving forward to close the contract and move forward. The town of Montecito loves this police department. It never wants to move to anything other than the relationship that we have. And we look forward to closure on this matter. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Anyone else? Seeing no one, I'm going to close the public hearing and look to the council for questions, comments, or a motion. Councilman Leonardis.
Thank you, Mayor Jensen. I will move with the recommendation in the staff report to authorize the town manager to negotiate changes to the 1995 Montecito Police Services contract with the city manager of Montecito and to adjust the annual increase cap and to consider other cost-sharing adjustments and recommend to the council the adjustments to those rates. And I will also add that I would like it to be seriously considered with all the services that we provide that are on par with Montecito to be considered.
Okay, seconded by the Vice Mayor. Any discussions, questions on the motion before I call the question? Okay, seeing none. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? Passes unanimously. Thank you, Mr. White. Thank you, Chief Frisbee. Okay, we're going to move on to item number 6, architecture and site application S-14-036, property location 240 El Cajon Way, applicant property owner, appellant Dmitry Lebedenko. And I should actually say, because after I made the speech about how we're going to do this, this is an appeal, so it's different. And we do call the appellant up first after the staff presentation. The appellant has an opportunity to address us, and then we'll hear from other members of the public. And then if the appellant wants to get up after and respond to anything that has been said, the appellant can do so, but does not need to. So, Ms. Savage.
Good evening, Mayor and Council members. The applicant is proposing to demolish an existing single home and garage and construct a 2-story home with a single-story attached garage. The application was considered by the Planning Commission because the proposal would result in the largest residence in the immediate neighborhood in terms of square footage and floor area ratio, and would create the only 2-story home in the immediate neighborhood. On March 11th, the Planning Commission denied the application because the Commission could not make the required findings to grant approval and because the project conflicts with the residential design guidelines. The applicant and the property owner appealed the decision on March 23rd. The Commission considered the whole neighborhood beyond the immediate neighborhood and found neither the immediate neighborhood nor the broader neighborhood to contain comparable house sizes. The Commission considered that El Cajon Way does not have any 2-story homes except for the house at the corner of El Cajon and Arroyo Grande Ways, which is outside the immediate neighborhood. The residential design guidelines discourage 2-story homes in 1-story neighborhoods, which the subject property is located in. Some commissioners considered the possibility of a 2-story home with modifications to reduce the mass and the square footage. However, the majority of the commission commented that the applicant should eliminate the 2nd story. Subsequent to the appeal, the applicant submitted revised plans. The revised plans reduced the square footage by 580 square feet and no longer include a cellar. The height is now proposed at 19 feet and 10 inches. The applicant has worked hard to reduce the height, mass, and the square footage of the proposed 2-story. However, the project still remains the only 2-story in the immediate neighborhood and the largest in terms of square footage and floor area ratio. For those reasons, staff recommends the council deny the appeal and uphold the Planning Commission's decision. Should the council approve the revised plans, staff recommends a condition included in tonight's desk item to require further architectural consultant review to refine project details. This concludes staff presentation, and staff is available for any questions.
Questions for Ms. Savage? Thank you. Before I call up the appellant, I'm going to ask council people to do disclosures regarding this particular item, starting with Councilman Rennie.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I did meet with the appellant, that's the right term, I think, the applicant appellant, at their home, and they reviewed their revised plans with me. I also walked the neighborhood several blocks around, and I discussed the neighborhood and the plans with a neighbor named Natalia.
Vice Mayor.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I met with the applicants, and I went throughout the entire neighborhood.
I did not meet with the applicants. I was not able to, but I did go throughout the entire neighborhood, including the property in question. Councilman Leonardis.
Thank you, Mayor. I met with the applicants this morning, and I walked around the neighborhood to view the other homes.
Thank you. I also did meet with the appellant applicant, and our conversation, everything we discussed was in their appeal.
Okay, thank you. So whoever is going to be speaking for the Lebedenkos? And just give us your name, please.
My name is Sheila Lebedenko, and I'm the spouse of the applicant, Dmitry Lebedenko, and I'm a co-owner of the house. Thank you, Mayor, Vice Mayor, and Town Council members for taking the time to consider our new proposal. The Planning Commission's feedback on our first proposal was very helpful in modifying the design to comply with the design guidelines. Tonight, we're appealing 2 points made by the Planning Commission. First of all, the Planning Commission report states that our project doesn't comply with the design guidelines because it would create the only 2-story residence in the immediate neighborhood. However, the residential design guidelines imply that a 2-story house can be built in a 1-story neighborhood, for we read in Section 2.3, Form and Mass, design 2-story houses in predominantly 1-story neighborhoods to blend with the smaller homes. An effort should be made to limit the house to 1 story in height or to accommodate second floor space within the existing roof. If a 2-story house is proposed in this type of neighborhood, the house shall be designed to blend with the smaller homes. So that's what we've done. We've placed the proposed second story within the roof of the house. We minimized the height and designed the roof features to blend in with the smaller houses. We made use of techniques mentioned in Chapter 2 of the design guidelines. A combination of 1- and 2-story masses, roof segments separating the first and second floor facades, second floor area contained within the roof form, deep recessed entries. We'll even plant trees in front of the house as suggested by the design guidelines. Our 2-story house at just over 19 feet will be lower in height than some 1-story homes in the neighborhood. We have removed the originally proposed excess attic and cellar and streamlined the house by lowering it 2 feet and adding 1-story elements to match the guidelines and blend in with the neighbors. It would be impossible for us to reach our FAR with only a 1-story house. We could achieve only about 1,700 square feet, which would not accommodate a family of 5 and also reduce backyard play area. More than 1,700 square feet would exceed the tree drip line boundaries and run into the setbacks as shown here by the site plan. Secondly, we're appealing the denial of our proposal for exceeding the FAR of our immediate neighbors, making us the largest home in the neighborhood. So let's look at the general plan. Policy LU 6.7. Continue to encourage a variety of housing types and sizes that is balanced throughout the town and within neighborhoods, and that is also compatible with the character of the surrounding neighborhood. And policy CD 1.2. New structures shall be designed to harmonize and blend with the scale and rhythm of the neighborhood. So some people want to live in big houses and some people want to live in small ones. By allowing us to exceed the FAR of our immediate neighbors, the town would allow diverse sizes within our neighborhood. Our proposal is compatible with the character of the surrounding neighborhood because of eave edges over the first floor, a recessed entryway, and siding similar to our immediate neighbor across the street, shown in the picture. And because our first floor at 1582 square feet would be roughly the same size as that of some of our immediate neighbors. We would also blend with the scale and rhythm of the neighborhood by keeping one-story elements over our garage and office. Eliminating the current 4-in-a-row cookie-cutter pattern shown by the streetscape here would improve the harmony and rhythm of the neighborhood. In the 15540 Elgato Lane case on August 19, 2014, Town Council approved of a similar-sized 2-story house in a similar-sized 1-story neighborhood, even though that house had FAR exceeding its immediate neighbors. Notice that the FARs in both neighborhoods are similar, between 0.12 and 0.18. The staff report in our case states the commission considered the whole neighborhood beyond the immediate neighborhood and found that the broader neighborhood does not have comparable house sizes in terms of square footage. This was true of our previous plan. However, now that we've reduced our proposed square footage to 2542 or 0.33 FAR, similar to the Elgato Lane square footage of 2581 with 0.32 FAR, the commission would find comparable homes if it again looked outside the immediate neighborhood.
You can finish.
I thought I'm supposed to have 10 minutes.
Actually, yes, for appellants, you get 10.
Okay. 260 El Cajon is just 5 houses away from us, and it's 27 square feet or 0.33 FAR. There's other 2-story houses on nearby streets that have similar square footage and FAR. Section 1.6 of the design guidelines shows how to determine neighborhood compatibility. So the greatest attention will be given to the immediate neighborhood where nearby homeowners are most likely to be confronted with the new house or addition on a daily basis, and where other residents driving by are most likely to see the new structure in the context of the nearby homes. Because of the curve in the street, when you stand on the street and look at our house, you do not have a good view of our neighbors to the right and left. In the photo, I'm standing in front of my house and cannot see 230 El Cajon to the right. Instead, we have a good view of 260 El Cajon, the 2-story house on the corner of El Cajon and Arroyo Grande. Therefore, our proposed project will not stand out where other residents driving by can see our structure in the context of nearby homes. Due to this curve, the 2-story house on the corner is part of our immediate neighborhood more than the smaller houses right next to us, according to this definition. Again, Section 1.6 states that the greatest attention will be given to the immediate neighborhood, not the only attention. 18 2-story houses are just outside of the immediate neighborhood. In the 15540 Elgato Lane case, Town Council looked outside the immediate neighborhood and permitted a 2-story house in a 1-story neighborhood. That was a transitional neighborhood, and so is ours. Here's a picture of a house around the corner from us that's currently being renovated. The 1959 homes in this neighborhood also have termites and asbestos, little aesthetic value, lack proper earthquake reinforcements, and have substandard studs that are too narrow to support a second story. Looking at each resident's property tax amount further justifies naming our neighborhood transitional. On our street alone, the property taxes range from just over $1,000 a year to over $12,000 a year. Our family is an example of a transitional family in the neighborhood. We started small with what we could afford, we saved money, and now we're ready to expand to meet our needs. We'd like to stay in this neighborhood. It's pleasant and convenient for us. My son can ride his bike to school, and my husband bikes to work via the Creek Trail and light rail. Now, we are the first in our immediate neighborhood to request a 2-story home, but after knocking on neighbors' doors and holding an open house to show our plans, we discovered the sentiment of our neighborhood. We have a petition with over 40 signatures that are showing that the changes are desired by the neighborhood. Specifically, Chapter 2 of the guidelines states some changes are inevitable, may improve the existing structure in our neighborhood, and may be desired by the neighborhood. Two-story homes improve our neighborhood by meeting the needs of our residents, which have changed since the 1950s. Our street, with very little through traffic, attracts families with children. Being able to have a two-story house, thereby preserving one's backyard, makes this a stronger family neighborhood because families are not forced to move when they cannot expand, and the green space is healthy for the backyard. What's more, we're improving the structure and neighborhood by making our house more sustainable. Our use of insulated concrete forms will minimize the use of wood during construction. Dimitri can show you what an ICF looks like. Heating and cooling can then be reduced by 50%. Los Gatos is working hard to be more green, and our construction methods support this effort. ICFs make the neighborhood safer because they're fire resistant for up to 4 hours as opposed to only 20 minutes for a stick-built house. The walls will have superior structural integrity and earthquake resistance. Finally, our proposals desired by the neighborhood, as you can see from all the signatures on the 6-page petition. To end tonight, we've demonstrated that we have complied with planning staff's request to stay within the FAR. The house now appears smaller and fits in with the neighbors. We've also removed the attic and cellar space to be fair to the FAR. All in all, we ask you to note that we have complied with the residential design guidelines and have created an appropriate design for the neighborhood. Thank you.
Thank you. Let's see if there's questions for you. Nope. Thank you very much. And those of you who are not the appellant, you have 3 minutes. So Leo Lebedenko. You don't have to take all your 3 minutes. You get 3 minutes.
Good evening, Mayor, Vice Mayor, and Town Council members. I'm on the PSA 01 Academy soccer team. I practice outside of regular practices. I use our backyard at 240 Al Cajon Way for practice space. We have soccer goals set up in the backyard. I also have a trampoline to practice other skills. Unlike Creekside, my backyard is always available for practice. But if we can't have a 2-story house and we have to build my bedroom in the backyard, I won't have enough room to practice soccer anymore. Allowing a 2-story house on our property will help the neighborhood by leaving more green grass and less concrete, and I can have the other boys in my neighborhood play in the backyard too. I like my neighborhood and don't want to have to move. I like living only 1 block away from the bike trail because I get to bike to and from school every day. Thank you.
Thank you. Giselle Lebedenko.
Hello, my name is Giselle Lebedenko. I live at 240 Al Cajon Way, where I have to share my bedroom. I just wanted to say my siblings and I do a lot of after-school activities. We are busier than my grandparents were when they were kids. My grandmother was my age back in 1959 when my house was built. Her mom didn't work, so she didn't even drive or need a car. Her family only had 1 car, and it wasn't even a minivan. My grandmother only had 1 hobby. She played a small instrument called the clarinet. She didn't even need a computer or a printer to do her homework. And her TV wasn't even 20 inches wide. Kids these days not only have to do more homework, but we're expected to do sports. And not just one sport. Cross-training is supposed to be healthy. We're expected to play musical instruments, makes us better at math, take after-school art classes, learn Russian, and make our own posters and dioramas for school. Well, my sister plays the guitar, piano, and drums, which takes up the space of 100 clarinets. She needs a room big enough to put her drum set in because no one wants to hear it. Believe me. Plus, I like to cook, especially cupcakes, and I always run into my mom and sister in the kitchen when I'm cooking. My sister has to keep her beloved muffin pans in the garage because there's no room for them in our kitchen. The spiders sleep in her muffin pans. I need space for my painting easel and my arts and crafts table where I make duct tape wallets. My siblings and I all need a trampoline to practice our gymnastic skills. Plus, I have lion head bunny rabbits, and they all need a place to run. And I really want to get a dog. A lot of my friends have busy families, too. Families these days just need more space. I like my neighborhood and my school, and I want to go to Fisher next year, and I don't want to move to get a bigger house. Then I might have to change schools. That's why some of the homes in my neighborhood should be able to get bigger. The owners need them to get bigger. Thank you.
Thank you. Miriam Dixon.
Good evening, Mayor, Vice Mayor, Councilman. Oh, I'm sorry. Good evening. Thank you for letting me speak tonight. I live in San Jose. I have 4 kids, ages 1 to 11. I'm interested in moving to Los Gatos for the schools. I can only gain access to Los Gatos and have the size house we need by buying a small 3-bedroom in a neighborhood like El Cajon and then expanding it as we save more money. The town doesn't need to worry that the house will become as valuable as other Los Gatos neighborhoods because this one has a power line running right through it, which depressed all the home values. Plus, the Lipidenko house will only have 8-foot ceilings. Not many buyers of $1 million-plus homes want to pay that much for only 8-foot ceilings. Their request is very modest. I would be afraid to buy a home there if the Lipidenkos cannot even expand to meet their FAR. I would just stay in San Jose and send my children to private schools. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Jacob Chen.
Good evening. Good evening, Town Council. My name is Jake Chen, and I live in the Victorian House in downtown Los Gatos. I'm also a competitive ballroom dancer, and my partner is Charlotta Lebedenko, who lives at 240 El Cajon Way, and she couldn't be here tonight because she is at rehearsals. My Victorian house has small rooms, and Charlotte and I have a hard time practicing in my house. We had hoped to practice in Charlotta's new cellar, but since she won't be having one anymore, we're planning to slide the sofas and table to the side to practice in her new living room. Her family needs to put the bedrooms on the 2nd floor, so the living room will be danceable. I understand that I live in the historic district, and we can't make changes to my house, but Charlotte's neighborhood doesn't look historic to me. And I think her family's building plans will make the street look nice and be useful for our families. Thank you for your attention.
Thank you. Eugen Wang.
Good evening. My name is Eugen Wang. I live at 236 Las Miradas Drive, very close to the Lebedenko house. I was here on March 11th. I'm glad to know the revised proposal has reduced house size and meet FAR. Please help to approve it. The Lebedenko family really need it. I would also like to share my own story to address the concern about the new 2-story houses in the neighborhood. My family bought our first house 8 years ago. We selected Los Gatos for great schools and a wonderful environment. The living area of my house is 1,495 square feet. We have 2 kids. At that time, the boy Harry was a 2nd grader, and the girl Linda was at preschool. It was a good start for us since we really could not afford a big house in Los Gatos. After 8 years, we still live in the same house. Harry is now a high school student and nearly 2 inches taller than me. Linda is a 4th grader at Blossom Hill. The house is too small for us. Talking about kids, I would like to use this opportunity to thank former Mayor Steve Neoladis for inviting Harry and Linda to be here to lead the Pledge of Allegiance on June 16 last year. As a parent, I feel so honored and really appreciate the opportunity. Over the years, my wife and I have saved some money. We try to improve the living condition for us and for kids. I can think of 3 ways. The first option is to move to another place which is less expensive, and we all love Los Gatos. This is not an option. The second one is to switch to a larger house in Los Gatos. It's just too expensive and not practical to change house here. The last and most practical option is seem to new additions. With a lot size of 6,386 square feet, a 2-story plan is inevitable. There are many families in the neighborhood that are making similar transition like us. Some of them already finished adding the 2nd story. Some of them are trying like the Lebedenko family. The two-story addition will meet our immediate needs, keep us here, and continue to work hard for a more beautiful and more valuable neighborhood. If we follow existing and possible new town residential guidelines, the new two-story house will encourage visual variety and look harmonically with the rest one-story houses. Thank you.
Thank you. David Adams.
Thank you, Mayor, Vice Mayor, and Town Council members. I'm Dave Adams, and I'm at 241 El Cajon Way, right across the street from the Lebedenkos. I love where we live. We have great access to, it's interesting listening to talk about the traffic earlier, because we live so close to the freeways. It's probably the best place in Los Gatos to be able to get almost anywhere, downtown, on the highways. We're right beside Vasona, right beside the Creek Trail. Great families, great neighborhood that we've heard many times. Two of my boys are some of the ones I think are showing in the pictures out there. They were playing in the street. We love where we live, and we think that the Lebedenkos, I mean, obviously they love living on the street as well. And I feel, and my family feels, that what they're doing is enhancing the neighborhood. I think that they were extremely considerate of the entire neighborhood, showing plans throughout the entire process to everybody, trying to get their buy-in, their feedback, and understanding what the considerations were of the rest of the neighborhood. I think they've come up with an extremely tasteful project that they've tried to amend over time to be able to meet the requirements that the residential design guidelines have set out. Been consider their neighbors as far as everything from not only the one-story buildings on the side, but window placement, and to make sure that if they're two-story home, wouldn't be looking into one-story homes, and consider the environment around them. I mean, like they mentioned, they can't go too far into their backyard because they have a historic tree, and they're making sure that that's being preserved as part of this project. We live across the street, and our home has been remodeled. We live on one of the smaller lots, and my wife and I have also been considering if we're going to be adding a second story or moving to another part of Los Gatos. I guess we're able to move to another part of Los Gatos, but as I mentioned, it's such a wonderful place to live in. We would rather stay where we are and expand to meet the size of our family. I mean, my boys, when we moved in, were young also, and now both are going to be in Fisher next year. The houses are too small. So, I mean, in following their process, I've also spent a lot of time reading through the residential design guidelines and trying to consider what we're going to have to go through if we're in a similar type of environment or a similar type of process. And I think that the way the Lebedenkos have approached this has been with a great deal, like I said, of consideration. And I hope that as they continue to amend this, that the council also gives them consideration and allows them to move forward with their plans. Thanks.
Thank you. Okay, I don't have any other cards except for this one.
Sorry, I won't make that a habit. Just sitting back there listening. Again, Ingrid O'Cleek-Irvin, 260 El Cajon Way. And thank you. I have several points. First of all, the town's green notice card indicated a remodel application sent to my house. It was pending in my close neighborhood, according to the card. I agree, my house is close to the Lebedenkos. I can see their house from my front porch. Thus, I would feel the town has officially designated my two-story to be close, and that should be evidence that a two-story indeed exists in their immediate neighborhood. So theirs would not be out of place. After all, if we use the current definition, we would have had no two-story in our immediate vicinity. I didn't hear about that when we were proposing our plans. Second, I'm concerned that a subtle but unrecognized economic discrimination exists against homeowners that wish to have two stories in Los Gatos. A case in point is the Laurel Muse development, in which the town approved 22 houses that occupy 2 acres. That means less than 4,000 square feet per lot. Almost all of the 22 homes are 2 stories. There are multiple ones over 3,000 square feet, meaning they exceed FAR. Almost all of the lots at Laurel Muse probably exceed FAR. But this and the 2 stories were allowed in a neighborhood with established foliage, but transitional housing variety like ours. Homeowners are the fabric of our town. We should not penalize nor shortchange them, especially when going vertical is the only practical option to preserve green space and add square footage. In many cases, a 1-story rule would effectively prevent homeowners from even coming close to FAR, presenting a dramatic monetary reduction in what they hope to get in the value of their home than I suspect many homeowners would be shocked by in this town if they knew that that existed. The town's FAR, lot coverage limits, and eye to appealing aesthetics are actually reasonable and fair guidelines. In this appeal, unlike some developers, the Lebedenkos are not asking you to alter the rules. Instead, they have formulated a set of plans that comply with the town guidelines. Unfortunately, I'm concerned that there are some decision powers that think because our neighborhood is humble, it should be restricted to single-story homes. There are two main flaws with this perspective. One, the original houses sell for about $1 million, and remodeled single stories are about 1.5. So putting an official edict to restrict all houses in the neighborhood to a single story does not somehow revert the price below $1 million nor create BMP housing. And two, if a proclamation such as this was applied to a single neighborhood, it could be construed as an unwarranted and undue hardship on specific homeowners. In other words, if you apply this type of decree and no longer allow FAR, even when complying with town building codes and height limits, to avoid geographic discrimination of a specific population, you would need to decree this across the town. I don't think that would be very popular with residents. Our house has been the only one at 2 stories for many years. Although this is a transitional neighborhood in which others are remodeling and improving the aesthetics, I don't see a mad rush to 2 stories anytime soon. The greater diversity of roofline heights and visual appealing architectural styles that have come with these remodels has dramatically improved the feeling of our neighborhood. Dramatically. The 1950s mass cookie cutter, subpar construction, monotone appeal is not appropriate. The north end is the poor end of town, but we also deserve to have diversity and charm.
So thank you. I'm going to ask you to wrap up because your time's up.
My 13-year-old son says, Leo has to stay because we need him in all of our outside games. Thank you.
Anyone else? Okay. Mr. and Mrs. Lebedenko, because you are the appellant, you can come up. However, I haven't heard anyone object to your project. So you can. And you must be Dmitry Lebedenko.
Town Council. I'm Dmitry Lebedenko, the appellant. I would like to take a minute and explain how a house would fit into the neighborhood from the environment and sustainability point of view. I will quote Design Guidelines Chapter 3. Green building addresses a broad range of techniques to reduce the consumption of natural resources during construction and over the lifetime of a home. The important aspect of our neighborhood is that it needs more eco-friendly homes that are built with eco-friendly construction methods. While our house is proposed to be close to FAR, its carbon footprint is minimized to match that of surrounding homes. How is this accomplished? We are going to use insulated concrete forms, and I brought one of those to show what they are. In order to build a house that has such a superb structural integrity and insulating properties that heating and cooling in such a house can be reduced by 50%, and that should be considered over a lifetime of the house. Our building has been also lowered into the grade in order to reduce the wall exposure. And about the air quality that's mentioned in design guidelines. The thermal mass of ICFs reduces temperature fluctuation inside the house throughout the day and thus far exceeds the Title 24 energy conservation requirements. Further to this, the use of formaldehyde-based bed insulation is entirely eliminated, leading to a healthy interior living space. The use of wood will be minimized, and therefore this will reduce the use of toxic fumigation chemicals, as there will be no termite problem. Our house will be built with little wood, and the cutting noises and disturbance to neighbors will be minimized. I would encourage the Town Council to set an example of environmentally conscious house and to show how to live a better life and spend less of non-renewable resources, and how to exceed the general plan requirements in terms of environment and sustainability matrix. Thank you.
Thank you, sir.
We still have 2.5 minutes left, so I wanted to add something.
You don't need to use it.
I don't need to use it?
You don't need to.
Oh, yeah, but there's something else to add. So Michael Kane, Planning Commissioner, was concerned about our tree. and he said that he wouldn't support anything that touched the roots of the tree. So we did hire an arborist that was recommended by the town, and the arborist determined that our original project, which was a lot bigger, was permissible. Now, our proposed revision has moved the house even 5 feet farther from the tree, and we're no longer requesting a cellar, so digging will not have to be as deep. The licensed arborist also confirmed the drip line of the tree. So any discussion by non-tree experts about how the drip line might not be true to the tree is unfounded and shouldn't be used as a basis for a decision on our proposed construction. The arborist made a tree protection plan that we will follow 100%, and our proposed project moves the footprint 11 feet farther from the tree than the existing structure currently lies. So the tree would actually have more room to breathe than it currently has. So we really care about the health of our tree. We enjoy our tree, and we feel that our proposal does not jeopardize the tree. That's all.
Questions? Councilwoman Sayoc.
Thank you for your proposals. I did watch the Planning Commission meeting, and you had 2 neighbors that were concerned about privacy, and I wanted to ask if those concerns had been resolved. Specifically, it was placement of the window, as well as the window type. I think he wanted frosted.
Yes, we've worked with our neighbors about their privacy issues. We've done a lot over the last couple of years. We removed a second-floor balcony in the backyard. We made the ceilings only 8 feet instead of 10 feet at their request. We removed second-story windows facing Neil's garden. So he no longer has any complaints because there's no window anymore. There's a closet there instead. And we also formed the shape of our roof so that Neil would get the most possible sunlight in his garden. So the shape of our roof reflects the shadow study that was done. We also moved the second-story house as far from the second-story part of the house as far from Neil and Bill as possible at their request, and they were happy about that. We minimized the tinted windows facing Bill's yard, and at their request, we moved the house as far from the tree as possible, and we removed the cellar because they were just worried about the tree. They like the tree too. So, the last time I talked to them, let's see, this is what they said. I showed Bill that we removed the cellar, and he said, "Oh, good, save the tree." And he said, "I like these plans a lot better than your last plans." And then Neil just came over on April 19th, and he said he likes our plans. He liked the way it looked. He didn't think it looked as big as the other 2-story house on the street, and that made him happy.
Any other questions? All right, thank you. Okay, the lights are out, so I'm going to close the public portion of the meeting and look to the council to see if they have any questions of staff, any comments, and or a motion. Councilman Rennie.
I'll start with a question for staff. I'm a little bit confused. Based on the alternatives you have in the alternatives, Alternative 2, you talk about approving the architecture and site application S14036, and you say attachment 11. But when I look at attachment 11, it looks different than attachment 10, and 10 looks more like what she put on the screen. I like attachment 10 better. Can you clarify that for me?
Yes, one moment. So attachment 10 are the plans that they are proposing. So that is a typo. It should be, let's see. For alternative number 2, you could choose their revised plans, attachment 10 to your town council report, or you could choose the previously proposed plans, which were Exhibit 13 of the Planning Commission report, which is attachment 1 to your town council report.
Thank you.
Ms. Savage, I want to make sure I understand. Page 5, of our staff report, paragraph number 2, where it says paren attachment 11, it should be 10?
Correct.
Thank you. Other questions? Vice Mayor Spector.
Thank you, Madam Mayor, for staff. A little confused. The staff report shows the current iteration having a FAR of 0.33. Is that the current one?
Correct.
And is there a FAR maximum in that neighborhood?
There is. It's based on the lot size, and the maximum floor area in terms of square footage for the property is 2547. And that equates to the same maximum floor area, which is 0.33.
So they are meeting the FAR?
They don't exceed it, correct.
Okay. And is a cellar allowed? Could they have built a cellar to their home without harming the tree or having some other environmental issue?
They could.
And with regard to the tree, I'm assuming that it is okay with the current proposal?
Yes.
All right, thank you.
Other questions for staff? Comments or motion? Councilman Leonardis.
Thank you, Mayor Jensen. Based on the testimony of the applicants and the support of the neighborhood and all the numerous citations they made to our town code and its interpretation, and the wonderful presentation that they have done this evening, I would go ahead and move to uphold the appeal of the Planning Commission decision and move forward to approve their revised plans. That was an attachment 10, is that correct? So that would be my motion. And it would be based on that there was new information provided here this evening, and that the Planning Commission didn't err or abuse their discretion or any of those other options in the guidelines.
Thank you. Councilwoman Sayoc.
I'll go ahead and second the motion. I do want to point, I agree that there was new information that was provided, and I do want to just elaborate that with this particular remodel, what they provided, there were certain considerations that they did that go beyond what concerns most of us when we're looking at two-story versus one-story. If you're looking at strictly on height, the comment that the height of their building actually exceeds some one-story homes is actually a very strong finding on my part, as well as neighborhood support and consideration of the tree and reduction of the impact to that tree by moving it backward 5 feet.
Other comments? Councilman Rennie.
I guess two things. I would suggest that we add to the motion that it is also subject to the conditions in Exhibit A of Attachment 8. I don't think that was included. That's the attachment that talks all about during construction, do X, Y, and Z, and so forth. Is that okay with the maker of the motion?
The maker of the motion, would you like to include that or not?
Sure.
And Councilman Rennie, I assume you're referring to essentially page 5 of the staff report with paragraph 2, correct?
Correct.
Okay, so Councilman Leonardis, were you intending that your motion include basically what's included in paragraph or alternative 2 on page 5 of the staff report?
Let me go back and take a look at that. My motion was to just approve uphold the appeal of the Planning Commission decision and approve with attachment 10, the revised set of plans. I didn't incorporate that other information in Exhibit A of attachment 8. I'd have to go back and look at that. So at this point in time, I'm not sure.
Okay. So right now we have a motion on the floor to uphold the appeal with the revised plans and the finding that the Planning Commission did not err or abuse its discretion and that there is new information, correct?
Yes.
Okay. So if we need to do an independent motion later, we'll do that. But unless you want to take time to look for Exhibit A of Attachment 8, which would be the standard conditions of approval.
I will incorporate that.
Is that okay with the seconder of the motion?
Yes, it is. And actually, if I make may I make another request of the maker of the motion?
You may.
On page 2 of the desk item, there was an architectural review that staff had requested since there wasn't sufficient time for the consulting architect to review the roof line in transition, and that it would be at Community Development Director's determination.
I will incorporate that as well, the desk item.
Okay, as will I.
Okay, so we have a motion on the floor. It's been made and seconded. Any other comments or questions regarding the motion? Councilman Rennie.
I'll just go ahead and comment that I will be supporting the motion. I think they've done a really good job of taking from their original design, which, you know, from what I saw, did look like it kind of sticks out in the neighborhood. I really like the fact that they sunk the second story into the first story. And, you know, when I look at the street side things, it really does look like it's not that much different from the other buildings. So I really appreciate their efforts to really make it look like the other houses in the neighborhood, or make it similar to the house that they had, and all of the other efforts that they made to follow the other policies in the general plan and so forth. So I will be supporting the motion.
Vice Mayor.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I'm actually really struggling with this one, and I think the applicants know that. You know, we worked really hard on our residential design guidelines, and we walked through just about every neighborhood, and we came up with a guiding principle of not demolishing homes in older established neighborhoods. And part of me really thinks that we either need to be prepared to not approve applications like this, or bite the bullet and change our residential guidelines, because it makes me very uncomfortable to approve something that is not consistent with the policy of our residential guidelines. And we just adopted those, I think, in 2008. So that is a real concern to me, and I can understand why. I thought the Planning Commission did a great job, so kudos to the Planning Commission, and it was a unanimous decision. Now, having said that, the applicants have come back to us with a house that does have a lot of square footage relative to the rest of the neighborhood. But their presentation is great. I do appreciate lowering the second floor pretty much into the roof line. The fact that they don't have very tall ceilings at all. So I'm sitting here, and I'm probably going to be struggling until the mayor calls the question, and then I'll have to see what happens.
So I'm actually going to support the motion. I worked hard, as did Councilwoman Sayoc and the Vice Mayor, on the residential design guidelines. I think I'm pretty familiar with what they're striving to do. So I am struggling with this a bit. I appreciate that the applicants have come back with a reduced design. I appreciate that they're doing what they can to save the tree. I would not make a decision, although I know that we have it in our guidelines. While support of the neighborhood is important, it's not the only consideration. So when I'm looking at this, I'm looking at lots of things. And one of the important things is also the fact that with the new design, you actually meet your FAR. So by coming into the FAR, you actually tip me over the edge to go and say, okay. I appreciate Ms. Oakley-Gervin's comments regarding neighborhoods. We don't have a category of transitional neighborhood, but everybody says it all the time. But there's no such thing in our residential design guidelines. However, it's not necessarily fair to put a timestamp on any neighborhood, and the guidelines are really designed to ensure that what we get is something that fits with the neighborhood, not something where somebody's come in and built a mansion where it doesn't belong. And that's not the application we have before us. So I appreciate and applaud the Planning Commission for doing the analysis that they should have done. for voting unanimously in the way they should. And I agree with the Vice Mayor that if we want to try to change this, we need to reconsider the whole design process. But I think we were really trying with those guidelines to make sure that we didn't get something that just was inappropriate for neighborhoods. And I don't think that that is this. So I am going to support the motion. So I am going to, Councilman Rennie.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I'd just like to add a little bit to what the Vice Mayor said. I did think about the guidelines and the fact that we're kind of going outside the guidelines by approving this. But to me, it's sort of what makes common sense, and this feels like it makes common sense to allow them to do that. So then that says to me that maybe we need to look at our policies and decide if they need a little more leeway. As she mentioned, the demolition of older homes, that's definitely an important idea. I'm wondering if we should modify the guideline that says the neighborhood is just 2 houses next door, because that seems like a small guideline. If I look at where does my conflict of interest lie near my house, it's 500 feet. That means I'm not supposed to vote on anything within 500 feet. So to me, that means, well, that must be my neighborhood. If I look at the example they gave us in the back of attachment 10, I see at least 5 houses that are within 500 feet that have 2-story. So I tend to think this neighborhood does have 2-story, and it would be, I'd be interested to see us think about changing our definition of what the immediate neighborhood is. Thanks.
Other comments on before I call the question? Councilwoman Sayoc.
Just because we did spend so much time with these design guidelines, I do want to point out that when we were creating them, we built in certain flexibility, and I think the language in there that we would put stronger emphasis on immediate neighborhood but not look only at that gave us that flexibility to take these considerations into account when looking at applications. And it's not just the 2-story versus 1-story when you're looking at the compatibility. It's the architectural type, it's the height, it's the mass. There's so many other factors that went into it where this applicant really did try to blend and harmonize in with that neighborhood. So I feel very comfortable that we followed the design guidelines. I feel very comfortable that the Planning Commission did as they did. But again, I think we created that so that there was a certain amount of flexibility so that we could take these specific cases into account.
Okay, other comments? Vice Mayor Spector.
Thank you. Just a couple comments based upon what I've heard. In this application, I was not looking at the immediate neighborhood. The immediate neighborhood, as we know, are the houses on each side and then the ones across the street. And neither I nor the Planning Commission looked at only at the immediate neighborhood. This is actually one of those neighborhoods where you can drive for a significant area and see the homes pretty much all the same as the one that is going to be demolished. So I did not consider this an issue where we were limited to looking at the immediate neighborhood. I do appreciate the height having come down. The mass, however, still is massive for the neighborhood. So I'm still not having to make my decision, but I just wanted to speak to some of the things that we've heard in the last couple of minutes.
Okay, I'm going to call the question. Okay, we have a motion on the floor to basically uphold the appeal. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Passes unanimously. No applause. Okay, thank you. We're going to move on to item number 7. Conditional use permit application U-14-025. Project location 165 Los Gatos Saratoga Road. Property owner, I'm going to get those names wrong, so I'm just going to say Alexander Holt. Holt's Restaurant, applying for a patio. Hello.
Good evening, Mayor.
Good evening.
Holt's Restaurant at the corner of University Avenue and Los Gatos Saratoga Road is requesting to modify their existing conditional use permit to permit dining with full liquor service on a new outdoor patio, which is proposed along the Los Gatos Saratoga Road frontage. The proposed patio would include a maximum of 53 seats and increase the overall permitted seating from 114 to 158. The proposed patio would include a new masonry wall and new drought-tolerant landscaping to buffer the view from the sidewalk and the street. The wall will be faced with the same stacked stone used on the restaurant. The Planning Commission considered the request on April 8th and recommended approval of the application, subject to the conditions provided to you in Exhibit A to Attachment 2 of your staff report. The Commission recommended the proposed wall be increased from 4 feet to 5 feet at the request of the applicant. In addition, the Commission discussed the operation of the patio and the applicant's desire to utilize the same hours for the indoor dining on the new patio. The Planning Commission, based on past practice by the town, recommended that the hours for the patio be reduced to 10 p.m. daily. The site does have residential neighbors to the north, across Los Gatos Saratoga Road, and to the south, so hours of operation of the patio should be considered in relation to the potential impact to surrounding residences. As discussed within the staff report, the site has sufficient parking between that provided on-site and those purchased in the parking district, and the increase in seating will not increase traffic beyond that of the previous high-turnover sit-down restaurants. The application, with the provided conditions of approval, complies with the town's alcoholic beverage policy, and staff believes the patio will be a welcome addition to the downtown. Staff recommends the Town Council follow the recommendation of the Planning Commission and approve the modification subject to the conditions provided in Exhibit A of Attachment 2. This completes staff's presentation. We're here if you have any questions.
Thank you, Ms. Mosley. Are there any questions? Yes, Councilman Rennie.
I guess I'm a little bit confused. I thought that the residences were to the south down University. You mentioned residents across Saratoga, Los Gatos Saratoga Road. And I recall, isn't there a dentist office over there and other office buildings?
There are residential units above that those dentist office, and there is also residential units on the other side of Los Gatos Saratoga Road, or on the other side of University, on that other opposite corner.
Isn't on the other opposite corner? I thought that was offices there. There's residences in that?
There are residences right on that other corner, on that other adjacent property.
Okay, I didn't think there was any there. Thank you.
Other questions? Thank you. I think we're done with staff report. Thank you very much. I don't have a card, but I see Mr. Holt. Would you like to speak on this? Come on up.
Good evening, Mayor, Vice Mayor, and Council members. I'm happy to be here in front of you today, and I'm going to keep this very brief and be here to answer any question you might have. I feel like the Planning Commission have done a really good job covering all the bases, and very simply, I am trying to build outdoor seating outside my restaurant on Highway 9 to be competing fairly with the competition like California Cafe, Steamers, Wine Cellar, and the list goes on. And I think it would really benefit the dining experience, and there's a lot of our guests that have requested it and they want to see it. And we put out a little, kind of a little rope, a string, to show where the patio is going to get some feedback. And it's been very, very positive feedback from a lot of the people coming through. And also I've spoken to the neighbors to see if there was anything they wanted me to bring up tonight. I actually walked over to my closest neighbor. There are pretty much the only neighbor I consider a neighbor that's on the back of the building across the parking lot. And I told him I was coming in here today, and if he had any concerns, anything that he wanted me to bring up, anything that we could discuss today, so that wouldn't come up later. And he said that he's very supportive, and he would love to have this work out. That's it for today. Thank you.
Thank you. Let's see if there's questions for you. Yes, Councilman Rennie.
How important is the time of use to you? Is ending at 10 o'clock good enough?
The problem with, I guess I need to understand the concept of ending at 10 o'clock a little bit more into details, because the way our restaurant is set up, we have open table, makes our reservations between 5 o'clock when we open until 9 o'clock on weeknights and 10 o'clock Fridays and Saturdays, because there's more diners that would like to eat dinner a little later on those nights. And sometimes our dining experiences, when they do the Holtz Experience, which is a 5-course tasting menu, it takes about 2 hours to go through that dining experience. And if someone makes a reservation at 8 o'clock and they sit down on the patio and they have dinner, and as they come to dessert, I have to tell them, I'm sorry, we can't serve you dessert because it's 9:59. Like, that is a big concern to me. I'm not requesting trying to turn this into a bar or anything like that. I'm trying to understand the concept of the hours. So if I can get some more information on that, I can answer your question better.
I think probably you, at least for me, you answered the question. Councilman Rennie?
Can we have Mrs. Privetti elaborate on that some more?
This is an item for the council's deliberation. You have the Planning Commission's recommendation where the patio would close at 10 p.m., but it is within the discretion of the council if you wish the patio to be open longer.
Thank you. Vice Mayor Spector.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. The restaurant closes at midnight now. Is that what you were saying, or did I miss something?
We don't really have an exact time. Like, we are allowed to be open till midnight on Fridays and Saturdays. We have our last seating at 9:45 and the last ticket going into the kitchen at 10 o'clock. So that means that the last sale happens at 10, but that ticket has 5 courses of food sometimes. Very rare occasions someone comes in at 10 o'clock and have a 5-course tasting menu. I'm just saying worst case scenario. There has been times where the kitchen want to kill me, where it's 9:45, 9:50, they sit down, last order, and they know that one table is left to order, and then they get that long ticket with 5 courses, and that even if you try and push that out and there's no one else in the restaurant, it takes an hour and a half. So there is times when the last guest kind of lingers out and everyone else is standing around waiting for it to close down. But I'm just seeing that as a big concern. Like, if it's complete shutdown at 10, like, what if the people are halfway through their meals? Like, it's very reasonable to have an 8:30 reservation. I mean, that's pretty much very common. You have an 8:30 reservation, and then 2 hours later, like, you can still be kind of eating.
Madam Mayor, if I might ask staff a question. Would staff consider, or did the Planning Commission consider having the beginning of the service prior to 10 p.m., as opposed to having the meal cut off in the middle of the meal?
I don't think it was the intention of either staff or the Planning Commission to say that a diner or a patron would have to cease enjoyment of a beautiful meal because of the hour of the evening. I think we could certainly craft the conditions so that no one is seated after a particular hour in order to allow the enjoyment of the meal.
All right, seated after. Okay, thank you. The Planning Commission actually did a really good job with your application and the dialogue that you had with them. I agree with what you said. I thought it was really good. But I just want to make sure that I understand that you're going to have, two stations, one hosting people to the inside of the restaurant and one hosting people to the outside. Is that what you finally decided on?
There was a talk about 2 hostesses, and I think they misunderstood me because I was trying to get up later, but apparently I didn't have that opportunity. It was kind of a funny silence in there because I think they kind of understood that they misunderstood me, but not how they understood me. So on a night where the patio would be open, on a nice, beautiful night, the movable hostess stand similar to this would be moved to the outside, and probably on a busy night you would need 2 hostesses, is what I was trying to say, because as one is seating a table. You don't want to keep guests just piling up waiting, and between like that 6:30 to 8:30 there is multiple tables coming in at the same time, so you need two people. Usually what happens is we have one on staff, and then I step out there and I greet people and I just small talk with them until the hostess comes back, and then she seat them again. So what I was envisioning, and I am flexible on this if you guys think that it's better to do it a different way, but their concern was that we would overserve and not keeping an eye on people who are actually eating while consuming alcohol. And that's why, in my opinion, the best way to do it would be to have one hostess stand controlling the flow of the entire restaurant. We do have a system called Open Table that does control that for us. But so people would come up to that one hostess. They would say, would you like to sit inside? Would you like to sit outside? They get seated at the table, and then that's where they sit for the evening.
All right. And you mentioned steamers and the wine cellar as, comparable kinds of uses. And they do have, one has one host, takes them inside and out. Another one has two hosts. But are you accepting of the fact that the host is there to assure that your clients, your patrons, are eating meals with their liquor?
Yes, very much so.
Because that was very clear to me during the Planning Commission that that's what they were trying to understand.
Yes.
And then the last question, again emanating from the Planning Commission, is that your staff is trained, and I know you said you gave them a lot of training. Is part of that training that that people who are drinking shall have food?
Yes. No, they do know that. They know that's one of the... My staff now has been with me, everyone except one has been with me for the last, pretty much since we got the liquor license, and they understood the reasoning, like the rules that came with getting that liquor license, and we took the certified alcohol test where they all had to answer a bunch of actually pretty difficult questions, and understanding the laws and the concerns and checking for IDs and so on.
And were they also, have you also trained them and tested them on the conditions of your conditional use permit, which is where you have the meal with alcohol?
Yes.
All right, thank you.
Councilwoman Sayoc.
Thank you. Mr. Holt, I believe you've had your full liquor license for a year now, correct?
Yes.
And one of the findings that we need to make is, should you like to go for alcohol service beyond 10 p.m., is that you do not have a history of complaint and noncompliance with local ordinances or alcoholic beverage policy. In the year since you've had your full liquor license, has there been any documented complaints?
We never got the police to get there. We never had any complaints, and I have never heard of anything being a problem from anyone.
Okay. And if I may, I do have a second question from the Planning Commission hearing. It was a great discussion. One thing I still wasn't clear about was the furniture. I know there was a lot of discussion about that. And your application and your vision is to have a comfortable environment for people to be outside. And it wasn't clear to me how that would be resolved if you were going to be bringing your furniture in. So is this something that you feel a condition that you can meet, or is it something that might require a little bit more flexibility?
I don't like to be the person that throws everyone under the bus, but after the meeting, I was thinking, like, how does restaurants take all their furniture and heaters and burners in every single night? So what I did is I drove around Los Gatos and I took pictures of every single outdoor patio, and not one restaurant had taken anything off, and that was at 11 p.m. So I don't think it's feasible to take it in. What I do think is very feasible is to cover it properly and block it off so it's safe. So it's they were concerned about what's the proper word? People that don't have a home, that they would come in and maybe sleep on the chairs. Because I mentioned that I wanted to have comfortable chairs because I think it's very important. Every single patio, in my opinion, here has a lack of, it's a lot of the very construction, like hard, what's it called, wrought iron chairs. So you sit for 30 minutes and then you have to leave, at least me, because I can't stand it. And what I was trying to convey was that I wanted to have it a little bit more upscale and contemporary with like cushions that you sit on that makes like it's a little bit more pleasuring to sit. And that made them to think that there was going to be people sleeping on them. And if there's any conditions that I need to install a camera or anything like that and block it off, that is definitely something I could do.
Okay, so Mr. Holt, I have just a couple questions. I'm looking at your current CUP, and it's your maximum hours of indoor operations are 9 a.m. to 11 p.m. Sunday through Thursday, and 9 a.m. to midnight Friday and Saturday, right?
Yes.
And you would intend to operate your patio the same way as you do inside, except there's no roof, right?
Exactly the same way.
Okay. And you are willing to cover your furniture, which will be behind a 5-foot concrete wall.
Correct.
And landscaping.
Correct.
Okay. Thank you. Other questions for Mr. Holt? Thank you, sir. I think you are done. Thank you.
Can I add like one little sentence or no?
Sure, I haven't closed the public hearing yet.
So I've just done a little homework, and it says Chapter 2, Section 6 in the town ABC policy for you guys to be able to grant past 10 p.m. serving alcohol. You need to find an A, B, and a C, and it says late night will not adversely impact adjacent neighbors, and no history of complaints has been found, and applicant has demonstrated a clear benefit to the community. I'm the incoming president of the Chamber of Commerce. I'm planning on raising my kids here. I really feel like I'm trying really hard to be a good role model in the community, and we have no complaints, and I think this is something a lot of the members of this beautiful community would like. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Holt. Anyone else want to talk to us about this? Well, besides you, anyone in the public? Or you want to ask a question of Mr. Holt? You can actually just say, I want to ask a question of Mr. Holt.
Thank you, Mayor Jensen. I would like to ask a question of Mr. Holt. When you mentioned your desire to serve alcohol past 10 p.m. on the patio, and it says daily in our staff report, as the Planning Commission deliberated that, do you need past 10 p.m. every single day to 11 p.m. on Wednesday night? Or would Friday and Saturday only be something that you could live with?
To be completely honest, Los Gatos is asleep at 9:30, so that would not be a problem during the week at all.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, so Mr. Holt, I want to ask you a question. In an ideal world, wouldn't your patio operate at the same time as your restaurant, i.e., 9 to 11, Sunday through Thursday till midnight?
That would be ideal, and it would just be simple to have it like that, yeah.
Okay, thank you. Any other questions for Mr. Holt? All right, thank you. Anyone else want to talk to us about a proposed patio? Okay, seeing no one, I'm going to close the public portion of the hearing and look to the commission for comments, questions, or a motion. Councilman Leonardis.
Thank you, Mayor Jensen. I have a question for staff, and I'm going back to last year when we approved the Inn at Los Gatos in the restaurant there, and we had a outdoor dining environment that we approved. And I was trying to remember what the hours that we allowed them to have their outdoor dining until with the alcohol service.
I believe Mr. Paulson is looking up that answer.
And I know I put you on the spot, so I'm sorry about that.
We'll bring you the answer once we have it.
Thank you.
Okay, I'm ready to make a motion. Do you need the answer to your question? Or can we have it while I'm doing the motion?
It's your meeting.
Okay, Mr. Paulson, how long is it going to take over there?
Does not look like they limited it differently than the restaurant.
Follow-up question?
Yes, Mayor. So the hours of operation of the restaurant, what were those in reference to the outside dining? And
So the hours of operation for the use are 11 a.m. to 11 p.m. Monday through Thursday, 11 to 11:30 on Friday, 9 to 11:30 on Saturday, and 9 to 11 on Sunday.
Great. Thank you.
Okay. Councilwoman Sayoc, do you have a question?
Actually, I was going to ask if you were going to make a motion or if you'd like for me to do so.
I was ready to make a motion.
Please do.
Okay. So my motion is to adopt a resolution approving conditional use permit U-14-025 to construct and operate an outdoor dining patio at an existing restaurant. Holtz on property zone C2, subject to conditions. I would make the findings that are in attachment 1, I guess, of the Planning Commission report, or it's our report, I suppose, regarding the alcoholic beverage policy. Mr. Holt summarized those. There's been no complaints. With respect to residential neighbors, I am going to respectfully disagree with the assessment of staff and say that residences on the north side of University across 5 lanes of Highway 9 don't really count as residential neighbors that we'd be looking at here. And where he wants to put the patio is separated by a parking lot, a restaurant, and some businesses on the east side, but I realize that there's a residence behind, but that residence has indicated that it does not have an objection. I don't think there's any reason to limit the hours on the patio to different than what the restaurant is. There's been no indication that there's any problem. It's not the same that we've done elsewhere. And if there's ever a place where we're going to put a patio and have no impact, this is it. So I am confident that it can be operated in a way that makes sense, that the hours should be extended to the hours of the restaurant, that Mr. Holt should be allowed to keep his furniture out on the patio without bringing it in every night, but that it be properly secured, which I'm sure it will be, because it's in his interest to do so, and properly covered, and that would be my motion. Is there a second?
I'll second it.
Seconded by Councilwoman Sayoc, sorry. Comments or questions on the motion? Vice Mayor Spector.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I will be supporting the motion. However, with regard to part of the foundation for that motion was that there was no objection by the neighbor to the south. Because we're dealing with a use and not a specific restaurant and not a specific neighbor, that's what I look at. The use, not the specific neighbor, and whether or not that neighbor objected or didn't object. Having said that, increasing the intensity of the restaurant by having the patio, will increase the potential for noise when people leave, because there will be more people leaving. But because there was the parking lot to the south and to the west, I am comfortable that this intensification won't be of detriment to the residential use to the south.
Other comments or questions on the motion? Councilman Leonardis.
Thank you, Mayor Jensen. And, piggybacking on what the Vice Mayor said, I am going to be supporting the motion. There are the residences on Boyer Lane, which is across University and down. We'll have to see how things go moving forward, but I'm confident that in the operator's ability to operate with these hours. So I will be supporting the motion.
So before I call the question, I just wanted to add to the record a couple of comments. Number one of the reasons I want the patio to be the same hours as the restaurant and encourage restaurants to be open for the hours that they're actually allowed to be open is that, for example, if we leave this meeting tonight, there won't be a single place we can go and get anything to eat. And so Mr. Holt and all you other restaurants out there who are allowed to stay open late and don't, there is a need for opportunities to go and get a meal or a snack or something beyond the hours when many restaurants are open. Number two, I appreciate the Vice Mayor's comment regarding noise impacts on the neighbor to the south. I mentioned that there was no objection because it's actually rather unique. Yes, we are looking at the use, but this particular location, I'm confident that we have the least possible impact on residences that we could possibly have downtown. And finally, Mr. Holt mentioned it, but I think that Los Gatos, we've had lots of discussions regarding our downtown and how it can be competitive and how it can be vital. And one of the ways to do that is by allowing things like patios, things like dining that happens later, and so that our downtown can be competitive and offer those amenities that people are looking for now. So that's another basis for my motion. Okay, so my speechifying is done. I'm going to call the question. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? Passes unanimously. Thank you, Mr. Holt. We have one final item on our agenda, item number 8, which is to consider the recommendations of the Policy Committee and the Planning Commission regarding approving the updated revised Planning Commission policies and procedures. Sarah, staff report.
Yes, good evening, Council. Since 1983, the Planning Commission, the Town Council has adopted Planning Commission policies and procedures. Over the years, the Planning Commission policies and procedures has been updated by the Council. The last update occurred in 2010. Last year in 2014, the Policy Committee undertook a close examination of the policies and procedures and made significant changes to that policies and procedures for the Planning Commission, eliminated redundancies, and to correct outdated information that was in that. Earlier this year, in January, the Planning Commission considered those revised Planning Commission policies and procedures that were updated by the Policy Committee, and they made minor changes to it and edits that are also included as your attachments. The big items that they did is they had a robust discussion on ex-parte communications and decided to leave the ex-parte communications intact and that they're not allowed to have ex-parte communications. Just incidental contact is okay, but no ex-parte communications that council is allowed. The other item that they did discuss that needs to be discussed by this body is the Planning Commission expressed a preference to reduce the speaking time from 10 minutes to 5 minutes for appellants and from 5 minutes to 3 minutes for rebuttal. We explained that the policy committee was trying to keep the policy the same for both the council and the Planning Commission, and they understood that, but they still wanted to see what council felt on reducing those times. And so with that, I'm open for any questions, or Ms. Perretta is also.
Okay, questions. Vice Mayor.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. For the town attorney, I have one question related to what he said, and then I have a separate question. With regard to Mr. Schultz, what you said, I actually have no personal problem with people speaking less rather than more. But why did the Planning Commission, if they said, want to keep it to 5 minutes?
I believe that's their current practice, and so they wanted to maintain those time limits.
Okay. And then the second question has to do with paragraph or section numbered 6, voting and absentees. I thought I'd better get this clear since I don't think I even have it clear for the council. I guess the first thing I should say is that first paragraph, as it's currently worded, didn't make sense to me. But what is the commission saying when it refers to what a quorum is and how many votes they would ultimately need to carry a motion?
So under number 6, voting. If you recall, with a recent policy change that we made, is that a quorum is based on the number of seated Planning Commission or any of your commissions and boards. So it is possible that you could have 2 vacancies and have a 5-member Planning Commission that were being seated. and therefore the quorum or the voting requirements would be 3 instead of based on a 7-member board, which would be 4 members in the normal situation. So we did make that change last year. So this goes along with this, that would require you could pass a project at 3 votes and allow that to happen. Under some issues that they would do, changes to zoning or changes to planning commission, though, they require still the 4 votes. So that's why there's that exception unless required by applicable ordinance or other law. There would be certain general plan amendments that would still come into effect that I believe that the 7-member, you would have to get 4 votes instead of the 3 votes. If that explains it, or did I make it even more complicated?
Well, actually, you made it worse, but that's okay. Let me follow up with some questions. Okay. How many planning commissioners have to be at the dais at a certain meeting to carry on business?
Right now, we have 7 seating members, so there has to be a quorum of 4.
All right, so they'd have to have 4. That makes sense. And of those 4, how many would have to vote in favor of an item for it to pass?
If there were only 4 were there, so you'd meet your quorum, you'd have to have 3 would have to vote for any motion to pass. You couldn't do it on a 2-2 would be a tie anyways.
That makes sense. Does this paragraph say what you just said?
Yes.
Okay, thank you.
Yes. And the example I was there, if there was only 4 there and it was a general plan amendment or a zoning change amendment, though, the law would require 4 votes. So all 4 would have to be vote in favor of that type of amendment. But a simple project, a PD, a CUP, those items could be approved by the 3 votes.
Let me just, Madam Mayor, I would just suggest that this paragraph is not as clear as it could be. And I'm not about to sit up here and make a motion to rewrite it, but I think what Mr. Schultz said is clear. This is not clear.
Councilman Rennie.
My question is for you, Madam Mayor. Should we be doing disclosures on this?
On the Planning Commission policy?
Yes. I did talk to 3 planning commissioners about this.
Mr. Schultz.
There's no need to do, unless you would like to do ex parte communications, but because there are our own rules and there's no property rights involved in the rules of the Planning Commission, there's no need to do ex parte communication, but you're certainly welcome to if there was ideas that you received from them that are part of your thought process.
I did speak to Commissioner Kane, Commissioner Erickson, and Commissioner O'Donnell, but I can't say I came away with any pearls of wisdom to share.
And you might not have wanted to disclose that, but any other questions for staff? Okay, I have a card, Ms. Katana.
I have to say, Lee Quintana, I have to say that I enjoy council meetings more now that there's a little bit more humor in them. Thank you. I just wanted to comment on the same section, but a different paragraph that Councilperson Spector did. That's on page 8, the 4th paragraph of voting and absences. And I'm just wondering whether that can be modified to include the same kind of requirements when an item is remanded from the town council back to the planning commission, that so that the planning commissioners are required to either be familiar with the same idea as what's already there, and that they need to either review the actual tape of the town council proceedings or receive verbatim minutes of those proceedings. And I was going to make a comment based on something that was said before, if I can find it. Oh, yes, it was a question. Under normal process for the Planning Commission, say an ANS or a plan development or something of that kind of project that comes before them. Does the same rules of no ex parte communication with the town council apply to those as it does for the planning commission to applicants, etc.? That's just a question.
Okay. Let's see if there's any questions for you, and then your question might get conveyed to staff. So let's see if we have questions for you. No. Thank you. Anyone else want to talk to us about this? Okay, so seeing no one, I'm going to close the public portion of the hearing. Mr. Schultz or Mr. White or Ms. Pravetti, can you answer Ms. Quintana's question regarding the application of the ex parte communication to the town council?
Yeah, town council is not prohibited from having ex parte communications. We've had that, I think the policy committee had that discussion, and so did council, and agreed that it's an important part of their process. They do have to declare their ex parte communications and describe any new information that they receive. So that hasn't been changed, but and that's the issue with whether to hold them to the same standard as the council or to change it. Currently, Planning Commission for quite a few years have had no ex parte communications. A little bit of background: the policy committee didn't make a recommendation to the Planning Commission. They left that specifically blank, and that's why there was the robust discussion on that issue on whether to have no ex parte communications, limited ex parte communications, or completely available to anybody.
Other questions, comments, or a motion? Councilwoman Sayoc.
Actually, I think I understood Ms. Quintana's question a little differently. Does ex parte communication include council members? Is how I interpreted your question.
That's what I meant. Can commissioners have ex parte communication with council members?
No.
Okay. Thank you.
Okay. Other questions for staff? Councilman Rennie.
This is probably more for my edification. So my understanding is they can't have ex parte communications before they've ruled a decision on a subject. After that, they can have ex parte with council or anybody else. Is that correct?
My recommendation, if a planning commission was going to ask me that, what I would say is there's always the potential that the item could be returned. For a good example was the appeal you saw tonight with an applicant who changed their project on the way it was coming to you. You could have easily said, why don't we send this back to the planning commission and get their recommendations before we make a final decision. So mine is you never know when the process is going to be over, so it could come back to you. And if it did, then under the current rules, the way they're written, they wouldn't be able to hear the matter.
Vice Mayor.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. And just from a matter of practice, the way that Mr. Schultz described his opinion on the issue is how I have practiced it.
And as a former member of the Planning Commission, that is my practice as well. Councilwoman Sayoc.
That was certainly my practice as well. And if it's okay, I'll go ahead and make a motion.
It's fine.
I appreciate the conversations that the Planning Commission had. I was particularly interested in their own ideas on ex parte communication, and I appreciated the opportunity to hear that from them. Having sat in both seats, I certainly would want to keep that restriction in place. And so I move to approve the Planning Commission policies and procedures as contained in our staff report and as recommended to us by the Planning Commission. I understand their recommendation for the time limitations, and certainly I appreciate that the chair always has the prerogative to change the minutes as they deem appropriate, but I do like that consistency between council and commission minute allocation, and so I'd like to keep it at the 10-minute mark that we have.
Okay, we have a motion. Is there a second? Councilman Leonardis.
Thank you, Mayor Jensen. I will second that motion.
Vice Mayor Spector.
I actually, what a surprise. I'm going to oppose the motion because I support the number of minutes that the Planning Commission wanted for its appeal.
I'm going to support the motion because I understand, and Councilwoman Sayak pointed it out, that it's always within the discretion of the chair to reduce those minutes if it's appropriate, and I think consistency makes sense, and I'm going to rely on the chair to use his or her discretion as appropriate. So I'll support the motion. Okay. Any other comments or questions on the motion? Okay. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? No. It passes 4-1. Vice Mayor Spector dissenting. And we are finished. Good night.